Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to all of our viewers. This is a live coaching session on how to attract your ideal client. I'm Dr. Nancy Zaire, the Sales Whisperer, and with me as a co-presenter is
Chase Friedman.
Would you like to say more about yourself,
Sure.
Chase?
No, that's all I've got. So yes,
Okay.
I'm a brand strategist and coach. I'm the founder of Vanquish Media Group, and it's great to be with both of you today. And we're going to have some fun doing some blending our strategies with Dr. Laura Witkoff, who's going to be our prospect, our client, and our patient today.
Right.
I'm the guinea pig.
Yeah.
So welcome, Laura. And Laura, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, very quickly. I have a doctorate in social work and really worked on messaging for smaller nonprofits. Then when COVID hit, I actually started a podcast called Small and Gutsy that's nonprofit. And it's free for all smaller nonprofits under 10 million in revenue and social enterprises to help elevate their brand. And I'm struggling with elevating my own brand. So I would love for Nancy and Chase to read me the riot act. What am I doing wrong? Well, yeah, how am I doing this? But I love doing what I'm doing. And we are just about to release our 96th episode. Yay.
Wow, that is so exciting. So, yes, and so we've invited Laura here to experience a coaching session, a very unusual coaching session, because normally you don't have two coaches in a coaching session, nor do you have two different frameworks from which the coaches are coaching. And so each of us, Chase and myself, are going to talk about our particular way of understanding the ideal client persona and how that applies to Laura. So Chase, go ahead and walk us through your approach.
Absolutely. So we kind of did initial introductions, but I'll kind of just briefly describe again, what it is that I do. I work with solopreneurs, small businesses, really focus on clarifying their message. I'm a firm believer that, all businesses and brands and people for that matter have the ability to find that balance of purpose, doing good and doing well. But that starts with sort of your core beliefs, your why as a brand. And that's why we're going to cover brand archetypes today. Brand archetypes really get to the personality of your brand, which at the end of the day, people aren't buying products or services. Sure they are, but at a deeper level, they're buying the notion behind it, the humanity, the essence, the personality of a brand. So we understand psychology, sure, but also how do we apply that to our messaging, to not just simply go and hunt and try to seek out clients, but align in a deeper level and attract clients to our business and our brand at a deeper core emotional level. So we're going to kind of talk about what brand archetypes are, how to identify with your respective brand archetype, Laura, and then how do you apply that to your respective business. And then Nancy, I'll kind of tap it back to you if you kind of want to talk about your ability sales system.
Okay, all right, I shall do that. So Dr. Nancy Zaire, and I'm going to talk about the likability system. So I'm going to quickly let you know that a likability is a skill that raises the feelings or thoughts within the other person, your prospect, that we're alike. And hence, that's why I call it a likability. It's the ability to raise that feeling, that thought that we're alike. And the likability system, there are 5 steps to it, but the most important thing that I want to share is the idea that there are 4 different personality styles. So I know that, Chase, you deal with archetypes, and I believe there are 12, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so a likability, of course, is only dealing with 4. Now, we are a combination of all 4 styles, just in a different amount and a different order. And so I want to quickly show people that after 35 years of research, the 4 styles are based upon the number of touch points, contacts that someone needs before he or she can go forward and make a decision. And the numbers are 2, 4, 6, and 8. Our number 2 buyer makes up their mind in only 1 or 2 touch points, whereas the number 8 buyer needs 8 or more touch points before they can go forward. And I've given you some key words that are typical because obviously that number 2 buyer they're fast and they're looking for quick results. Whereas the number 4 is a relationship person. They want to bond with the seller. Your number 6 is very concerned about safety, and so they need a process that they can follow. And finally, our number 8 buyer, it's all about information and about return on investment, understanding the value. We are a combination of all 4 styles. As it turns out, 30% of the population is just one strong style. 60% go between 2 of these 4 styles, and then you can see the statistics about 3 and then 4 styles. And so I'm going to stop my share and again turn it back to you, Chase. And would you like me to add the?
Sure, you could if you want to bring up the slides again. I'm in the room with two doctors here, so I'm kind of the outsider. But for all those listeners that are into the psychology of these things, obviously Nancy's process is going to be fantastic. And Nancy, I know that's your background. This is archetypes are based off of the Carl Jung sort of personality archetype, and we just apply those to brands. So for those who like to geek on both the kind of intersection of psychology and brand work, that's what we're going to dive into today. So what are we going to learn? What are we going to cover, right? How to unlock your brand archetype, right? To obviously attract your aligned clients. Okay. A lot of us struggle to find that right message, that right tone, that right delivery, but we're often grasping for what is that message? What are those right words? These archetypes and Nancy systems are going to help really provide clarity to align both our own identity and align it with our ideal client. Understanding that client motivation and buying style, right? What are they seeking? What are they looking for, so that we can reflect that back to them. Obviously, we're going to be blending a little bit of the brand strategy and the sales. Marketing and sales don't always speak together. They don't always have that sort of intersection, which is kind of a paradox. But that's what I thought was so special, to kind of bring both of our disparate approaches today. And of course, what are the tactical frameworks? What does this coaching process look like? Like Nancy mentioned, very rare you get 2 coaches in a room together. So we promise to play nice, and Laura, we'll be easy on you. But hopefully you'll emerge with some greater clarity. So what's broken, right? Why are we here? Why would people kind of even choose to kind of implement this in their business? As business owners, as entrepreneurs, a variety and litany of challenges that we have to face. But at the end of the day, right, we are seeing more and more of this, not even a trend, but a movement towards conscious consumerism, as I like to call it, right? 86% of consumers value authenticity. But if you can imagine, most businesses, they tend to sound the same, right? There's this competitive commoditization where you look at a litany of different products in an industry, and it's almost a process. So how are you supposed to stand out against that noise? 60% of small businesses fail in 3 years. A lot of times that's due to kind of not ever really getting the foundation, that clarity, that identity messaging. 1 in 3 solopreneurs lack confidence in attracting aligned clients. I've certainly been there, starting out in my business. Who am I supposed to be speaking to? How do I speak to them? How do I attract that ideal client? And I don't just mean anybody. I mean the folks that you really do want to serve and you do enjoy working with. And then, of course, as we mentioned, sales and marketing misalignment, right? Not always the overlap and the synergy that you would expect. So, so this is not something that is uncommon. I think all of us here today have experienced this. How we get you out of the fog and get you focused, aligned, and purpose-driven for growth. I'll take this. We have kind of 3 key points we want to cover in this talk. I'll take the first, and Nancy, I'll kind of toss to you. But the biggest thing that I face when I work with clients is trying to be all things to all people, right? We have to understand and embrace the truth that we are not for everyone, and that be a superpower. We should lean into that, right? before I ever knew what an archetype was, I was working harder, seeing fewer results, saying yes to work that didn't light me up, attracting clients that weren't the right fit, right? But when I started to understand and ask better questions, not only of my clients, but of myself, I started to lean into what was that purpose that drove me to start and run a business, but serve others, right? And that passion, that purpose, once I was comfortable and confident enough and vulnerable to wear that on my sleeve, it was amazing the amount of people that were able to come to the table and say, hey, I think you can help us. But that was after quite a long period of time trying to seek and search of how I would fit for everyone. And that simply is not how you stand out in a very crowded place. So archetypes allow you to do that. And it obviously allows you to kind of lead a clear message, visuals, identity, offer.
That's one of my very strong messages to my audience, is that you really do need to find a niche. And most people have what is known as FOMO, fear of missing out. And hence they have a broad message. They broadcast to everyone and anyone. But when you do that, you get no one. And hence, by narrowing and focusing and niching and using an archetype or using an ideal buyer persona, this is where your audience, their ears perk up and they say, ooh, that's me. And now it's much easier for you to target your marketing efforts, spend less effort and money and resources in order to attract the right fit clients.
Yeah, again, what we're talking about here is getting clear. And if you're not clear with yourself and your own identity as an owner, an entrepreneur, business owner, how can your audience expect to understand what you do? We tend to overcomplicate things when simplicity, clarity, and consistency is key. If you can imagine, there's infinite amount of messages hitting you every single day, from social media to digital media to ads to television. How do you cut out that clutter? As human beings, we are wired to really, quite frankly, filter out the majority of that noise. We just simply can't retain it all. So unless you really arrive at that singular message that hits someone at a deeper emotional level, it's very, very hard to penetrate that first level awareness. So of course, the goal is understanding who you are and how you show up in the world, aligning that offer, that product, that service with the right messaging and the delivery of that value and that promise. So again, clarity, simplicity sounds easy, but oftentimes for many of us, it's a process. And these tools we're going to share with you today are hopefully designed to do that and help Laura on her journey. So what are archetypes? The cool thing about this is archetypes have been around since, the dawn of storytelling. All this really is a reflection of different personality types, fears, motivations, identities, wants, needs, desires. These are core human values and qualities that, we've broken down into, not we, but, Carl Jung and a variety of other great thinkers on this topic have broken down into 12 major classifications, okay? And as you can see, there's kind of 4 general quadrants, right? So we have, we're going to go through not all 12 of them, but as you can see here, based on your identity as a brand and the identity of the audience and the client that you're trying to attract, there's a bit of a system here. And we're going to try to identify both a primary and a secondary archetype for Laura, with some key questions that get to the root of who she is and who she wants to serve. And you'll see how this can start to reveal the type of languaging and the messaging and the alignment that will help her position herself in the marketplace and ideally resonate at a deeper level with her ideal client, okay? So how do we apply them, right? I've got a little bit of a wheel here. It's kind of an example of different brands and the different archetypes that they're in with. If you kind of take a look at how these kind of exist, you can kind of see, for example, the Skittles, they're known for their irreverence and their sort of kind of almost dark humor, right? Versus the Rebel, Harley Davidson, iconic brand, sort of that rebel spirit of Americana. Apple, the magician, right? Known as a brand that is certainly about thinking differently, but creating almost this magical quality around the products and services they offer. you kind of see these are generic, obviously large brands, but if you kind of take a moment and kind of think about what each of them signify, if you dug a little deeper into each of these archetypes, you'll see that everything that they do as a brand, from their logo, their colors, their messaging, their brand strategy, aligns within the core elements of these archetypes, right? They speak to the emotional core of their audience. So you notice that none of these brands fill the entire circle, right? They're not trying to be all things to all people. They're within their own unique lane, their own unique category to create that sort of resonance and recognition amidst all the competitors in their field, right? It's just a faster way for us to build emotional connection, right? I always like to say, and this is a great, the godfather of branding, Marty Neumeier, your brand is not a logo. Your brand is not what you say it is what your audience believes it to be, right? So it's not just what you say, it's who you are when you show up. It's all things. Look, feel, messaging, sound, tone, which can be quite ambiguous until you really understand what is the palette that you're working with as an archetype. So again, why do these matter? Why do we need to know such things? As I said earlier, people buy off of emotion first and logic second, right? And there's infinite research to prove this. People don't buy products, they buy stories that align with their identity and their core values. And we're getting even more into this new era of conscious buying. When there's so many different products out there, how are people supposed to differentiate? Well, people are willing to pay more, to work for and invest in purpose-driven and value-aligned organizations. These archetypes are meant to help you be consistent across multiple touch points: social media, website, sales material, collateral. Obviously attract the right clients, and quite frankly, in some cases, repel the wrong ones, right? It's just as important to know who you are versus who you are not for. And then obviously raising the bar in terms of memorability, trust, loyalty, giving someone something deeper than just a feature or a tech spec or a price point to believe in, right? Sure, someone might buy a product as a one-off because it's the lowest cost option. But is that really going to make them sort of a lifelong loyal customer? Is that something deeper that they're willing to invest and become a brand ambassador for? So again, these help you cut through the white noise because quite frankly, they feel real and they are made to make brands human versus just mere products and services. So, Laura, I'd love to getting into the coaching of it, right? I did ask you to take a little bit of a personality quiz, ahead of time to kind of ask some of these priming questions, but I'd love to do that with you here and now to get your sort of, initial reaction to it, right?
Yeah.
So starting with, what is the core motivation behind your business, right? Or put another way, what's your why behind Small and Gutsy?
Yeah, it really was driven from the pandemic and really trying to work with the smaller nonprofits where I had focused on messaging from my doctoral work. And because I think everybody in a nonprofit or social enterprise at whatever level can be an ambassador for their organization. And I found, having worked in that sector for a very long period of time, that funding was such an issue, and in part because people just didn't know about them. And I'm talking about the smaller ones, not the, well-funded ones. And so what motivated me to really think about this is how could I get, in some way, the biggest bang for the buck for them without stressing them too much during COVID, which was 2 hours of your time. I'll interview you. I will sort of take on the platform and try to spread the word. And then you can use it in any way you want, meaning the podcast, the social media stuff, the clips that we do. And it's been an iterative process. But for me, what developed out of this was the passion that I have appreciated in seeing what other people have done with their passion. And so I sometimes joke inside myself, I don't know if I'd say this publicly, but now I am, is that I think there's a part of me that can't stay put. And would I ever jump into a nonprofit and totally stay there? And I think Small and Gutsy gives me this beautiful breadth of looking at thousands of nonprofits all over the world and see what wonderful things they do, and that drives me. That's a passion of mine, is to help them spread the word. And also social enterprises that are small and getting started, because they're doing amazing things in the world, from helping people sustain their revenue in small rural communities, to addiction programs that are into recovery, to summer camps that work with particular marginalized groups, to boys and girls clubs, to there's I've released 95 episodes, and it's been one of the deepest joys of my life, to be honest with you. Because I get to see and witness firsthand, in an interview style that doesn't have questions except for the little quick and gutsy questions at the end. It's a iterative, organic conversation that I get to have that pulls people out. So I use my social work skills, and I'm certified in MBTI. So when you bring up Carl Jung, I just love that stuff. I'm a believer in that. And so what I get to do is highlight why people do what they do. And it's deeply touching and emotional. And I always do a preamble kind of introduction, so that the people I interview, and this is my, Nancy will probably say this is part of my personality piece, but that there's an instant connection. I've taken the time to see who they are. I've vetted them. Doesn't mean someone else shouldn't vet them. They always should. And that I've learned about them, so I can speak somewhat intelligently and ask questions that drive them to talk about their inspiration and motivation and how they help other people. I don't know if that's kind of what you're looking for, but
that's exactly it. And I think what's wonderful is we got to hear this from you, first person, obviously, within just a couple of minutes of a pitch. But imagine for someone who doesn't know you, who's not tuning in right now, a potential prospect, how else would you convey what you just conveyed to us with that passion and that presence and that purpose, through a website, through a social media post, through a marketing message, right? It's hard to translate that. Talk to me about,
it's a great question.
One of those challenges for you, right? Clearly, your work is driven by passion and purpose. How have you pursued, or what is the challenge you faced in trying to form that connection and formulate that message one-to-one, but to many?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I have a lot of listeners, like over 15,000 unique downloads, but I don't have a ton of followers on Instagram. And I think in part, there's a couple reasons. One is I have to sustain myself. I'm a volunteer. This is fully funded by me and donations that people give me, and some donors. It's hard to get foundations or corporations because they want to often give to direct service. I never have an issue, like most nonprofits, getting clients, basically getting people who want to be interviewed. I hardly advertise for that. I mean, I do, but most people just come and say, oh, I'd love an interview. I love what you said, Chase, because I occasionally say no when it's someone who wants an interview for their own purpose as a consultant versus for a bigger purpose of what their if they don't have a nonprofit, but they serve nonprofits. I'm not there to help, providers, market to nonprofits. I'm there for the nonprofit to elevate their visibility. So for me, the biggest challenge has been not a couple things. One is how to get funding to continue my own sustainability, because I want to keep doing this, even if I fund it mostly, but to just have some revenue coming in. And the second, I think, is to convince a foundation, donor, funder, whatever, a corporation who wants to do a series on climate, or a series on, addiction management, or a series on suicide prevention, or a series on whatever youth programs, that they would say, hey, we want to pay you. We're going to be one of your partners or donors. We'll pay you per this episode, or give you a chunk of money that helps the infrastructure, because I pay a sound engineer, web person, platform, blah, blah, blah. And that's been a challenge because I haven't known how to get there entirely. Does that make sense?
It does. You're not alone. I do this for a living, and it's still, a challenge for me and many other practitioners. Sometimes we're, walking around like a barefoot cobbler, but I get that it's hard to translate that degree of depth and passion for what you do to an audience on, quite frankly, very crowded platforms and mediums. Let me ask you, so when you think that's, you articulated who you like to show up as in the world for your clients. What kind of people do you love working with and why? What is that divine right client, as I like to say?
Yeah, that's a great question. The people that I like to work with the most have passion about what they're doing because I can relate to that. And even if it's not something that I necessarily, would embrace myself, it doesn't mean I can't appreciate someone else taking that on and saying, this is how I want to impact the world in a positive way. Of course, that is a sort of a value of mine, is how do you want to make the world a better place? And it could be anything from how do I help the small villagers sustain themselves to I want to have, my organization helps by employing people to then learn a skill and get it out into the world. To I want kids who are marginalized to have a camp experience because they can't afford to, or because they've been alienated because of their gender or some kind of medical disability, frankly. So I think that my ideal client is someone who believes in what they're doing, that will impact the world in a positive way. And then I can usually pretty easily get on board with that. And again, my only area that I've sort of put a line through, and I'm not religious or political, and I've done podcasts in both of those arenas, not the political, but religious. That is not my faith necessarily, but faith can help a lot of people. So as long as it's not proselytizing and has a subtext for example, one I did was around combating sexual assault, to be honest with you. Another one was, I love this one, years ago. I said, if I weren't Jewish, I would totally go to your church. It was someone who did church discernment, but actually what he was really promoting was consulting to people who were creating those environments through this community effort. And so I just thought, God, that's really cool. So I've met the most incredible. I could probably name you something out of the 96 episodes I do, because somehow studying it, researching it, even though it's a snippet of what they do, it gets integrated into my soul. It's a weird thing. And that's what I love so much about it. I don't even know if I answered your question, but yeah, it's people who are passionate about doing something positive in the world.
So I'm going to break in here because, as you know, I deal with personality styles, and the style you're talking about is what I label the number 4 style. And this is the person who leads with causes, wants to do something of significance, wants to do something beyond self to make a difference in the world. That's the number 4 style. It's a person who's fairly quick in making up their mind. They want to, they don't waste time going after things. They quickly give away themselves, their trust. But because they're quick in giving away their trust, there are times when they have been deceived, or they have been gullible, naive. And so this is also a style that tends to have buyer's remorse. And they need an additional touch point after they've agreed to something to be reassured that I care about you, and it's because of our relationship that I want to go forward.
That's an interesting point, Nancy. The only time I struggle with my decisions are usually around when I'm at a restaurant, because I want to order everything. I have a hard time picking. But I think in general, I operate a bit on my gut, which can serve me well, except when I disregard it. And I sometimes disregard it. It's a really good point.
And small and gutsy, I guess, is well named, right? No coincidence.
Yes, it certainly is. Yeah.
But Chase, I want you to pipe in terms of what archetype corresponds with that passion, that wanting to do better in the world and to give back. What is that archetype?
Good question. That's what we're going to drill down to. So, Nancy, if you wouldn't mind sharing the screen again, I want to bring up this archetype wheel. Now, I love your approach because it's 4 and that's clean, right? We've got 12 here. However, these 12 are broken into 4 quadrants, and it's interesting. I didn't think about this before, but I'm wondering how much these align with your 4, Nancy. So, if you break it down into 4 quadrants, you can kind of see here. there's leaving a legacy, pursuing a connection, providing structure, and exploring spirituality. So before I kind of give my take, Laura, I'd love to hear from you, Nancy, as well with your system. What would be the one or two? We like to kind of have one primary, one secondary. What would be the one or two quadrants that you feel that you would exist as a brand?
I can say it in 2 seconds. It's like hit me in the, like this is easy. Pursuing connection and leaving a legacy. Pursuing a connection is probably number one. Leaving a legacy is number two. Easy. Like seriously, when you break it down this way, I didn't have to take any quiz. I could just tell you. No, I'm teasing.
Well,
but it's really, it becomes so in your face evident. Doesn't mean I disregard the others, which is Carl Jung's work too. You always have all, but those are the ones that I would lead with. And I think Nancy, talked about it in terms of number 4, and you certainly did in your introductory comments about archetype.
So if we look at these 4, and you've said leaving a legacy and pursuing a connection, Nancy, I'm curious, do you feel that this somewhat overlapped, aligned with those, with your system as well, in terms of the essence of what her brand represents?
So clearly, the connection would be that number 4 style. Yeah. People who want to connect, and so I actually had Laura take what's called the likability scorecard, which identifies her personality style. And out of 100 points, she scored 89. So that was her highest score. She is a very strong person who wants to connect.
So, spoiler alert, I did ask, Laura to take sort of a bit of a personality quiz we like to use that helps define and align with what that aligned archetype is. And sure enough, the 2 that she chose, I don't even think you had this option of the quadrants, Laura, but I'm glad that it helped. So if you look at what those 2 quadrants are, they represent sort of the upper left and the upper right, obviously, of the archetypes. Right. And if you care to share the 2 that you sort of landed on, and obviously we'll see where they land, and I can kind of unpack what those mean and how we apply them.
Yeah, I landed on Sage and Magician, and I actually ended up taking it twice because one, I had the head space of like as if I were small and gutsy, and one was myself. So the first one I landed on with small and gutsy was Ruler, which was like not me. And I understand why that happened when I took it again, because then I said, okay, let me just let go and really let it be me that comes through. And the reason being is when you're fully responsible for the output of something, I can be controlling around it because it's my name, my brand, my this, my that, even though I'm representing, talking about other organizations. If I don't do a good job as a host, and again, I never give my questions out because I don't have them, it's organic. So I'm relying on an organic conversation that is not scripted because I don't like something that's not, genuine. I'm totally about, and if it messes up and whatever, then it, we edit certain things, but not a lot. You can talk to my sound engineer. I think I give him a pretty good product. So I could see why that came out as Ruler. And the first time when I took it again and thinking, okay, as Laura Shirk-Witkoff, how do I see this brand as representing me? I came up as Sage and Magician. And that really feels comfortable. But I understand why, the idea of Ruler came up. I think I have some of those control issues. And I think a lot of founders and executive directors and heads of organizations do, because it doesn't mean that you don't want to share. But when you have such a tiny little organization, and the buck stops with you in sort of every arena, when something drops or something doesn't get done or somebody's unhappy, it rests on you. And so sometimes I have to say, no, I think we should do it this way, or the sound doesn't sound great here. Can we redo it? Or, luckily out of 95 episodes, I would say everybody's been really happy. So that's been a blessing. Now, again, they don't pay for it, but hey, they could still complain about it.
We'll get you there. Well, look, it's obviously an imperfect science. We're dealing with emotion and subjectivity and personality, much like a Myers-Briggs, right? So the goal isn't to put, a data point to it necessarily. It's to give you a realm, a sandbox, if you will, to leverage your unique sort of zone of genius, another way to put it, and share that with your ideal client, right? Versus trying to consistently reach for verbiage and terms and framing for how do I show up in the world? This is kind of a filter and a lens. So Sage, you mentioned, which is all about sort of understanding, and obviously, as you can imagine, that sort of sage wisdom as a podcast host, right? But asking guiding questions. As a social worker, same thing. I can see that there. And then the magician, the transformation of helping these, small but gutsy organizations and nonprofits transform lives, transform themselves for greater impact in the world. So I want to reveal kind of what this means and get into how do we apply it, right? A bit of a sort of an archetype guide that I like to use. It's almost a cheat sheet, let's call it. And as you can kind of see here, one for each archetype, right? So for Sage, you can kind of see some of those core draws, fears, strategies, motivations, keywords. So if you look at this as almost a palette of colors that you can paint with in your messaging, these are words that are steeped in that Sage archetype, right? Another word to describe it, you see the variants at the top: detective, mentor, shaman, translator. Then you look at, okay, well, how does my audience seeking? What is that transformation they are seeking? And then I can offer that draw, that's seeking wisdom, intelligence, expertise. What do they fear, right? What is my strategy as a sage? Showing the path to wisdom, lifelong learning, guiding thinking processes. So again, a palette of words and languaging and personality elements that you can infuse in your brand to show up more authentically, and with the level of passion and purpose that you shared with us a moment ago, describing it as what you do. Same thing with magician, right? As you can kind of see here, the draws are transformation, knowledge, belief, discovery. You can even see keywords at the bottom: change, transform, innovate, manifest. When we think in terms of marketing and branding, languaging is the greatest tool that we have. And each word has significance. And if you're just using a generic palette of things that you think are going to pitch and sell, I promise you it is going to come off as white noise to your audience. And so hopefully this, Laura, is at least a little bit of a playbook, a sandbox, if you will, to select that right intentional languaging around how you want to help in the world and reflect the needs, the motivations, the desires of your ideal client, right?
Yeah. And so what I also did, Chase, is that I asked Laura to take the likability assessment, and I asked her to select values. And the values are, I fed them into a device, and I can, it's a chat AI tool. I've created prompts, and then I went ahead and I generated a list of those words. And let's see, I'm going to share my screen also and share the words that I came up with.
I was afraid I chose too many.
No, you were fine. And so those are the words that you chose. And again, they may overlap with the ones, Chase, that are the archetype. I did not, obviously, I didn't know, but there they are.
Yeah, we didn't compare our notes ahead of time. This is cool to see this for the
great.
first time.
Well, and this is the way Laura likes it, right? It's spontaneous, it's raw, it's live. But again, for those of you interested and are looking for your own ideal client persona, this was done in a twinkle. And I fed in the value words that Laura chose. I fed in her occupational status, and I have given, obviously, the likability system was inputted, and lo and behold, here are the words that came out. So I'll stop sharing my screen at this point.
That's great. Yeah. Not a surprise, but it's nice to see it confirmed or affirmed.
But, the bottom line is there are two issues that you came with. You want to get funding for your podcast, and you'd also like to perhaps be engaged, which is another source of funds, for a series that perhaps have to do with nonprofits or educational piece in that genre. And so, Chase, how you and I mean, granted, I would go much more deeply into understanding Laura. I'm sure you would too. But what can we offer her that is along the lines of helping her monetize? Because that is her problem. And it's a problem that many solopreneurs face.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think at the end of the day, what you want to do with both of these tools is start to build your ICP, right? Build your ideal client profile. Beyond demographics, getting into psychographics is what we're kind of talking about here. And use that as a much deeper way to filter who your targets might be, right? Funders, sponsors, brands, guests. And the beautiful thing about this is it works across the board. As I showed you with this kind of brand wheel, there are many, many brands out there that align with one or two of those different archetypes that you chose or that you identified with. There, you've got low-hanging fruit of like-minded, value-aligned people, brands, organizations, you name it, that are already speaking that same language. They're already that value the same sort of core truths and beliefs. So instead of looking at a white blank paper, you can immediately go and scour the landscape of who is already sort of inhabiting these personalities, these archetypes, knowing that you've already got a foot in the door, right? This isn't a cold sell, a cold open, getting someone to start to understand and believe who you are. They're already drinking the same Kool-Aid, right? So it makes for an immediate icebreaker and, quite frankly, a deeper emotional resonance beyond facts and figures and stats. And, so you're not just finding a match, you're finding an ideal aligned match that hopefully isn't just a one-off engagement, but a lifelong sort of partnership.
Right. I love that, actually, for so many reasons. I think the first is when I think about client, I think about the organizations I interview, but really my client potentially are the funders or the corporations. And I think that is really hard to manifest because I'm not there to convince somebody from that perspective. So you've already kind of are a step ahead when you meet with people who have the same values, have the same. And so for me, I think that's a great opportunity for me to think strategically moving forward of where I want to go. And actually, I had just gotten an email the other day, and I'm just starting to post it on new episodes, that FeedSpot is looked at social media platform. Social impact platforms, and we're number 8 on their list of 30. And that was a huge, that like, I didn't solicit them. I didn't know them. I didn't whatever. And I was like, wow, how did they find me? So those 15,000 downloads are doing something out there. So that was a big highlight because it affirms what I'm doing, because the process for a lot of entrepreneurs in the social service space is hard, because it's just sort of slow and steady, whereas I just want to be there and blow it out and be funded and just do my work because I love these organizations, right? But it's much more complicated than that. And I always think to myself from them, but it really is so different. And I think and you probably feel this way too, Chase, just from a marketing perspective, marketing is hard for people to pay for, and yet it's necessary. And people in the public sector, not social enterprises, but in the public sector, can't use public dollars for marketing. It's not allowed. So I become an avenue that's free, but needs to be supported as well. So we'll see what it iterates, but I love this concept of reaching to people who already have the same alignment in the donor space, foundation space, and corporate space.
And in that way, Laura, is where I can definitely help you, because yes, you need to generate a list of people that have those characteristics, but then each person you speak with, this is where we can identify their personality style and adjust what you say to match their style. And so
right.
again,
I love that.
do you talk about, again, big picture and vision, or do you talk more about, return on investment and getting their name out? What are their motivations for investing in Small and Gutsy?
I love what you said, Nancy, because I think a lot of people, myself included, make the mistake that we love what we do so much that why wouldn't everybody else love it? And I have been asked the question, how large is your social media? And I'm like, it's not that large, but I have downloads. And then they go, oh, maybe they'll pay attention. So their return on investment, even though it's only 2 hours and it's free, it's their name too, connected with this platform. So you're 1,000% right that all of those styles of why people purchase come into play. Sometimes I wouldn't say more so, but equally as important in this sector because it's their reputation. They don't want to be, they don't want to put it out there if they don't feel like it's going to come back in a positive way to them. So yeah, I think you're 100% right.
As we said earlier, to echo those quadrants, right? Leaving a legacy and pursuing connection, right? Great motivators for someone to want to partner or sponsor or collaborate with you, knowing that your platform be a champion of those things, right? Leaving a legacy for their business or brand, pursuing connection with a desired target audience of their own. So again, continuing to keep those things in mind. The 4 things I'll kind of just share with you, Nancy, if you're able to pull up in this slide just one more time, as a guide for you and anyone listening, right? How do you apply these things, right? So we obviously talked about brand voice, right? Just the overall voice and languaging you use in how you show up in the world from all of media and messaging, passionate, transformational, etc. The messaging itself, and I think Nancy kind of highlighted this as well. What are those emotional outcomes? And in some cases, they might be ROI based, but striking that deeper emotional resonance. Obviously the audience match, this is helping you achieve that as well. People who value that depth, that mission, that community. And then positioning yourself, right? A lot of podcast hosts out there, and probably quite a few in your specific niche as well, but beyond a host, you're a champion for these small and mighty organizations and missions. So just a few ways from a brand and marketing standpoint, you can leverage these tools to become like that internal compass, right? Guiding all of those different strategies and efforts and materials, from copy to campaigns to kind of find that ideal client fit.
I love that. Yeah, and it may shift a little bit depending upon, to whom I'm speaking, as Nancy pointed to. It depends what they value. And I love thinking that way because it's like having a guest on the podcast. I might have someone who's super quiet and I have to draw them out, even though they love what they do. It's my job to help them put their best foot forward and manage that conversation on their behalf. And the same is true with messaging and knowing, who the other person is, who's a decision maker on the other end. And Chase, to your point, recognizing which bucket, what area that potential client, or in my case, donor or foundation corporation, falls into that's going to make a difference for them. And I always end up like, there's a piece of me that feels like this tinge of guilt. And then I get rid of it because it's a waste of time on, well, these nonprofits should really be getting the funding, not me. And I'm thinking, whoa, wait a second. I'm giving them a platform. I'm giving them a voice in multiple places for them that I'm doing pro bono. And sure, podcast guests usually don't, they don't pay. Well, some maybe do. I don't really know. But they're also heavily sponsored, the big ones. And the space got sort of infiltrated, for lack of a better word, by celebrities during the writer's strike, like everybody who was anybody, influencers. So sometimes it's hard to distinguish what's kind of real content and what isn't. And then there are plenty of self-help and great things out there. So I don't want to discount that. But my little niche area is so specific, but it's a tool for those organizations to use to raise their visibility within their networks. And so it's teaching them a step beyond just the podcast and putting it out there. It's that next step. So referring to Nancy or to you, for those organizations to actually invest in a bit of marketing and a bit of sales strategy. For Nancy, forgive me for lack of a better word, but it is a strategy. And I think sometimes people are afraid to invest in themselves because I think this immediate gratification, where it's really steps along the way that then gives back a zillion times over, because you're teaching people who they are and how to recognize the certain things in other people in order to affect a positive outcome.
I was smiling as you were explaining that piece, especially the reluctance that you have from time to time to put your need for funding forward first, and that's typical of the clients I work with. They're brilliant. They have so much to offer. They've invested in their gifts, their occupational credentials. But when it comes to marketing and selling, they get a little squirrely. They feel funny about being salesy and pushy. They don't want to be aggressive in that way. And, part of what I do for my clients is I help them, just like you corrected your thinking. I help them realize you put on your oxygen mask first, because you can't help your audience until you're breathing freely. And there's, nothing impeding your ability to provide.
That's such a good way to think about it. And I really believe, even though we in sort of this nonprofit social enterprise sector always have sort of the scarcity mindset, there really is stuff out there for everybody. And sometimes it's in kind, sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's pushing an agenda forward to help other people, sometimes it's connecting people. And I do believe it does come back. So otherwise I wouldn't have almost 96 episodes out in the marketplace.
There you go. So we need to wrap it up here. I notice, Chase, that you have, again, the 3 points that you are making.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully this up a little bit, just succinctly what we've talked about today. You're not for everyone, and don't look at that as a curse. Look at that as your superpower. Right? Lean into that unique sort of identity and that unique archetype and persona, because there are plenty of people out there in your aligned tribe that are ready and waiting and wanting to do business with you. Like attracts like, but opposites convert at times. And then clarity converts, confusion repels. So again, if there's anything I think, hopefully from Nancy and myself can convey today is that clarity and then that next step. In terms of how you show up in the world, who you're targeting, how you're speaking with them with intention. Don't try to overcomplicate things. Try to distill it down to what feels right, what feels natural and lights you up.
I love that.
And
but I just wanted to, Nancy, at the end, I just want to thank you both. This has been just it was a short period of time, and I feel like I learned a ton. And just being in the moment with both of you, really thinking through, if it's done anything, it's sort of also impacted, it sort of unlocked me a little bit and sort of to help me move forward. And so I really appreciate that. Really appreciate it.
Well, I think that both of us want to uplift and support you and see your message thrive. That's why we're giving to you.
Yeah, it's huge.
You're our archetype. We align with you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being our guinea pig.
Oh, I loved it. Are you kidding? I encourage everybody out there. The one thing I want to leave people with is invest. Invest in yourself through the help that you need. And Nancy and Chase are very giving and very knowledgeable. And already in this little snippet, I am taking away so much and really appreciate it.
Right.
Thank you.
Last words, Chase?
Look, as you said, Laura, this is just a snippet, right? This is kind of what Nancy and I love to do. This is what lights us up, our purpose in what we do for, our careers and helping others. So obviously if this resonated with anybody, on the call, we would love to connect. Obviously reaching out via LinkedIn. I actually have a series of archetype blogs on our website, vanquishmediagroup.com. You can do a whole deep dive and kind of learn more about each unique one and what that means to you. And obviously, if you'd love to kind of connect one-on-one and and do a deep dive for yourself or your business or your brand, I would love to connect with you.
And I'm going to invite people to, let's see, I'm going to share my screen again. I have a quiz just as you do. And the quiz is, who is your ideal client? It's a bit.ly/capital Q for quiz, capital ICP for your ideal client persona. So feel free to, I guess that, I don't know if I shared that screen. Maybe I didn't. But anyway, feel free to take that quiz and join us. So with that, we want to wish you the best in this upcoming week. And thank you again, Laura, because it's not easy to let everybody see what you're doing and really get that, insider view. And, for Chase and me, again, coaching is something that's usually not visible to unless you are the coachee. So we hope that you've enjoyed getting a different perspective about how looking at personality style, whether through archetypes or through the likability system, might be able to have you hone in on your ideal client so that you can thrive and get more business. And so it's
Nancy,
yes?
Sorry, you might want to post in the chat the bit.ly quiz.
I will do that.
People can, and then this will be posted where? Because if anyone has any organizations they want interviewed, it is pro bono, smallandgutsy.org or laura@smallandgutsy.org.
Yeah.
Is
it showing on screen now?
Oh, it is now, yes.
There is the bit.ly.
Yeah.
That's the bit.ly quiz. So,
got it.
All right. And to your sales success, this is Dr. Nancy Zare and Chase
Friedman, thank you all for being here. It was a pleasure.
And
thank you,
Laura.
Thank you for really taking the time to walk me through this. And I feel like I have a much better understanding in this limited period of time. Of course, I need more work to do, but I really appreciate it. Thank you for everything. Thank you for your time.
All right.